For a couple of years, there was one dead giveaway for an AI-generated image. Not the lighting, not the garbled text on a sign in the background. The hands. 6 fingers. 7. A thumb sprouting out of another thumb. The same model that could paint a flawless, photorealistic face would then bolt a horror movie hand onto the end of the wrist. And it did it over and over. So why hands? Why did that one thing trip up the smartest image generators we had built? It turns out the answer is not that hands are hard to draw. It is something a lot more interesting about how these models see the world in the first place. Once you get it, you will understand not just the hands, but why AI images go wrong in general and where they will keep going wrong. Start with the thing that sounds obvious but is not. The model never learned that a hand has 5 fingers. It was never told a single rule. Nobody sat it down and said, a hand has 4 fingers and a thumb, always check the count. These image models learn in a completely different way. You show them hundreds of millions of pictures, each one paired with a description, and they slowly soak up the patterns. What a cat tends to look like. What evening light does to a street. What the word hand tends to line up within actual pixels. And here is the key. Put a face next to a hand and the whole problem snaps into focus. A face is wonderfully consistent. 2 eyes roughly level. A nose down the middle, a mouth below it. From almost any angle in almost any photo, a face has that same basic layout. The model sees that arrangement millions of times and locks it in hard. A hand is the exact opposite. A hand is a shape-shifter. Think about how many ways a hand can look. Open, in a fist, waving, pointing, holding a mug, fingers laced together, half tucked behind a leg, gripping someone else's hand. Fingers overlap. They bend. They hide behind each other. From the model's point of view, the word hand maps to a wild, messy cloud of millions of completely different shapes. It almost never sees the same hand twice. So instead of a clean rule, it learns a vague impression. Hand means a palmish blob with some fingerish things coming off it. And the one detail it never managed to pin down was the number. The count was never fixed in its mind, because in the training photos that count was constantly hidden, blurred, or only half visible. So when it generates a fresh hand, it produces the right overall vibe, a palm, some fingers, the right skin and shading, and then more or less improvises the exact amount. Sometimes it lands on 5, sometimes 6. There is no little counter inside it saying, stop, you already drew 5, you are done. And that links straight into the second half of the story, which is that the model is not really drawing the way you imagine. It is not planning a hand, deciding on 5 fingers, and carefully placing each one. What actually happens is closer to sculpting fog. The image begins as pure random noise, like television static, and the model removes that noise step by step, nudging it towards something that fits your words. At every step it is asking a local question, what would make this little patch look a bit more like a hand? It is not holding a master plan that says this hand gets exactly 5 fingers. So a 6th finger can quietly grow in a spot that, all by itself, looks perfectly hand-like. It helps to picture a room full of artists who can each only see one tiny square of the canvas through a little window. Each one is told, make your square look more like part of a hand. One artist sees what looks like the base of a finger and dutifully extends it upward. The artist in the next square over, working from their own little view, also sees something finger-like and grows one too. Neither of them can see that together they have just produced 1 finger too many. There was no manager standing back, looking at the whole hand, counting. The picture gets stitched together from thousands of confident local guesses, and a miscount is exactly what you get when each guess is individually reasonable, but nothing is enforcing the rule. This is why the failures were always so oddly specific. The model was never confused about skin, or shading, or the rough shape of a hand. Those it had seen a million times, and they were rock stable. It only ever lost the plot on the part that was genuinely ambiguous in its training data, the precise fingers. It is the same pattern as everything else these systems do. Rock solid on the consistent, high-frequency stuff. Shaky on the rare, variable, rule-based detail hiding underneath. You can almost predict when it will fail. One hand, open, palm out, tends to come out fine now. But 2 hands shaking, or fingers laced together, or a hand wrapped around some complicated object, that is where it still falls apart, because that is where the shapes overlap and hide each other the most, and the training pictures were the most ambiguous. It is the same story with the other classic AI image tells. Text on a sign melts into gibberish because letters are precise, rule-based, and endlessly varied. Teeth quietly multiply. Jewelry fuses into skin. Every one of those is the same underlying thing wearing a different costume. Strong where the pattern is stable, lost the moment it needs an exact count or a hard rule. So why are the newer models suddenly so much better at hands? A few reasons stacked up. They are bigger and trained on far more images, so they have simply seen more hands in more positions. The companies building them noticed the meme and deliberately fed in more hand data and more human feedback aimed right at the problem. And the models got better at keeping a little more global consistency while they denoise, instead of working purely patch by patch. But notice what did not happen. Nobody handed the model a rule that says hands have 5 fingers. It is still pattern all the way down. It just has a much better pattern now. Which is also why hands can still break, especially when 2 of them are interacting, gripping, or tangled together, because that is exactly where the shapes get most ambiguous all over again. If you actually generate images and you want to dodge this, a couple of practical moves. Hands in simple, open, clear poses come out far better than hands doing something fiddly, so prompt for that when you can. If a hand comes out wrong, just regenerate, or use inpainting to redraw only that region, which hands the model a fresh roll of the dice on the hard part. And quietly lower your trust on any fine, countable detail in an AI image. Fingers, teeth, the spokes of a wheel, the text on a sign. Those are precisely the spots where a pattern machine with no rules tends to wander off. The 6-fingered hand was never really about hands. It was a window into the entire way these models think. They do not learn rules and facts. They soak up patterns, and they are amazing wherever the pattern is strong and consistent, and wobbly wherever it is rare and ambiguous. Hands just happen to be the most visible place that truth leaked out. Once you see it, you will catch the same logic everywhere AI does something almost perfectly, and then fumbles the one small detail a child would get right. And that is exactly what we do here, one clear idea at a time.